I know one of the ways that I talked about the honesty shift in the past was that like you can't start where you wish you were, right? You have to start where you actually are. And it got the name the honesty shift because 9 out of 10 times, if we're not making progress, if we're not liking how fast something is happening for us, it's because we're not really being honest about where it is we are starting right now. There are a lot of reasons for that. I have I have sat on one-on-one coaching calls and told people like, I think you have an entitlement problem, right? Um, because and I mentioned that in one of the lessons. Like sometimes we think, oh, I was really successful in my past career, or I'm really good at what I do. Why am I not getting paid for it, right? I'm of the age that I should just have my shit together at this point, right? Or like, I used to be really disciplined. What happened, right? All of these different things that like we think either should still be true for us or should be true for us at this point or whatever. But like, it doesn't change how things are. Um, and sometimes I also, it flies in the face of what you often hear about creating the life that you want for yourself, right? Because sometimes people get a little too stuck on, well, but here's what's real, right? And then they just want to talk about their limitations. Well, I have this problem and I have this problem and I have that problem and well, but this is wrong. And then this is when we enter the wallowing phase, right? But there's a difference between saying, here's where I am, and it's like your GPS finding you. So I don't know about you guys, but I never have location services on my phone. I think I'm one of the few weirdos who does that, but okay. So a couple of people know what I'm talking about. So I never have location services on, but then every once in a while, if I do actually want to use maps or something, I'll turn it on, right? And it's like, then all of a sudden it finds you, right? But until then, it's not like I could get directions. So I can know where it is I want to go, but until I know where I am and am like really clear and comfortable with that, I cannot give myself turn by turn directions. And so if you're not making progress, or if you're trying to follow a blueprint that isn't working, my nose is itching something fierce. Sorry, that's really distracting for me too. Um, so if you're not getting where you want and you can't follow directions or you can't follow steps, it's probably because you have some kind of idea about what should be possible or where you should be or where you think you deserve to be or whatever, right? And a lot of that flies in the face of like, but you are worth it and you deserve this and you deserve that. And like, but stay high vibe and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, and um, so this shift is a lot about like making sure you're not bullshitting yourself. And I say that with a lot of love because like we've all done it. It's more comfortable. It's more comfortable to think like, well, but this is where I am, right? This is what I'm good at. This is what I deserve. This is what it should be possible for me. Than to admit actually, no, so far this has failed or this hasn't worked out or I haven't been able to do XYZ thing. That's really uncomfortable. So it's kind of my disclaimer for acknowledging the uncomfortableness that is this shift. Um, I know one of the first couple rounds of prep work, I said that I had debated making this the first shift because like it's really important, but everybody was like, no, it's good that you did not do that. We would not be ready for this right out the gate and nobody would come back. So here we are, neatly positioned in week 4. Um, that is also why we talk about reverse engineering, because there's no point, you guys, in reverse engineering what it is you want until you're clear on where it is you actually are, because most people don't reverse engineer backwards far enough. So you watch any webinar that's selling you like a canned system, right? And they are talking about things that most people won't get to until they're a year in, right? You talk to somebody about like manufacturing a product or making, and they're like, but I don't know any manufacturers in China. And I'm over here like, you got 50 things to figure out before that. Do not worry about the manufacturer in China. Right? Well, but what am I going to do about filling orders? And I'm like, do you got a spare closet right now? Because that's enough. Like that'll hold 10 orders. Get 10 orders and then figure out where you're going to put 100. And then figure out which kid you can take a bedroom away from, right? But we're not wired to think that way. We're wired to think like, well, what's the whole picture that I can try to figure out all the eventualities for, right? And this shift is also part of like being okay with moving one step from where it is you are right now, just kind of related to last week. I'm gonna go turn on my light because it drives me nuts to see half my face like completely black. Um, while I do so, please think amongst yourselves about where it is you're at this week. It doesn't even need to be honesty shift related, because at this point we could talk about almost all of them. But like, where do you find yourself and where are you stuck, or what is not working, or what seems clunkier than it should? Here I go. Okay, was that long enough? I can talk too about my husband if that's easier. If you would rather me talk about my husband than we talk about you guys, that's fine. I'm sure he's fine with it. Um, I'm using a TV tray. There is no space for a desk lamp on this thing. So, all right.
They make wall-mounted lamps, and we can point it out.
It is true.
Old job, so I know how to solve that for you, but I'm
snake it over.
I'm staying in my boundaries. I don't do that anymore.
Okay, guys, like, because I mentioned in the group, right? Like I honesty shifted my husband this week, right? So in his case, he works a corporate job. He would like to climb the ladder, but he's been there for like, I don't know, 12 years, 28 years, a long time, right? And it's been like the same crew of people. He knows who his boss is. He has a performance review with this guy every year. Every year they say the same shit, right? And but does that stop my husband from expecting a different result? Will this be the year where he can successfully beat his head against the wall enough to get them to see things his way, right? And he thinks it will, right? But this is why I mentioned things like, giving people the benefit of the doubt. My husband is an extremely positive person. And this week I was telling him, I'm like, you need to learn from my negativity a little bit. You like accept reality here. And this is where I'm making jokes, right? But it's not really about being negative. This is like he keeps trying to get something from a place where he can't actually get it, right? Some of you keep trying to build a business via social media and you just need to let it go, okay? Like it's not your thing. Some of you keep trying to build a business by doing what some of you try to go high ticket, some of you try to go low ticket, some of you try to like, if it's not working, there is a huge amount of peace that comes from knowing what it is you're trying to get out of that thing and saying, you know what, I'm actually not getting that thing out of this, right? It's not a pass to not put in effort, but like the man has had the same conversations with his boss, like conservatively 5 times, right? At some point, you got to say, I'm not getting what I want out of this situation, right? But this is carryover doer mode, you guys. The doers of the world are like, but if I put in enough effort, but if I prove enough, but if I am compelling enough, if I convince enough, right? Like there is something I can do that externally is going to create a result that will then make me feel better, right? And that is like, that's how a lot of the world is set up, where it's like, I'm going to change the things outside of me. And then because I have created a different result, I will feel different, right? And that is the fastest way to white knuckle what it is you're getting, whether that is sales or likes or subscribers or inquiries or whatever the heck we're talking about here. So that doesn't mean that you don't want that thing. Like my husband still wants what he wants out of his career. That's fine. I want him to go get it too. But like, know when the method that you're using is not the right method for you. And there's a difference. This is where we can have conversations about it, right? It takes a lot of discernment to know, am I giving up, right? Like, is this resistance that I am just not working to overcome? I haven't figured out my way around this thing. I haven't healed whatever the thing is, right? Or is it time to let it go? And that you kind of learn by like messing it up a lot and then experiencing what does it feel like if I do it in a good way, in the right way, right? Last night we were talking and I was like, so what do you want right now? And he couldn't answer me, right? He didn't really have an answer for that. And a lot of times, if we don't really have an answer for what we want, that's when we just keep going. Well, like, I'm just going to keep bulldozing, right? And he's like, I just want freedom. Okay. He's like, I just want more money. And I'm like, literally, those are the two answers I do not let anyone get away with, because those are always bullshit. Those two answers tell me you don't have clarity around what it is you actually want, right? Because if you knew, then I asked him, I was like, okay, freedom to do what? Well, whatever I want. Okay, well, give me an example. Like, what would you do? So he came up with like one like little project that he's been wanting to do forever. I was like, cool, like go do that this week, right? But then I was like, okay, well, what do you want more money for? Well, so that I can buy stuff. All right, like what stuff, right? He could not actually come up with a concrete, like, this is what I'm going for. Okay. Yes, my husband wants to buy prep work merch. I can assure you he's the last person who would buy merch. So he didn't have a concrete answer. And this is true a lot of times. This is true for people who like, look, it's easy to say what I want out of the business is money. That's easy to say. But like, that's like level 0.2, right? Because like, what are you going to do with it then? We've had so many conversations in other workshops and rounds of prep work. Somebody asked once, like, why can't I, like, say, for instance, I'm going to make this amount of sales and then I'll go buy myself these shoes. And I'm like, because some part of your head knows you could just go buy the shoes. Like, it's total crap. You're not a 4-year-old who needs to be like bribed. You're bribing yourself. Okay. Like if you want the shoes, go get the shoes. You have the money for it, go get them. Okay. And so that type of coercion is not going to work for some of you. So, but then if it's not, what is it that you actually want? Well, in my husband's case, I was like, you don't know what you want because you're so either head down doing your work or you're numbing out from head down doing your work. Those are your only two modes right now. You're not actually like hearing it yourself. You're not actually taking any time for yourself. I will totally let him listen to this recording so he knows how much I outed him. Uh, but like, until you guys really, and this is part of being honest with yourself, is like, do I know what it is I actually want? And often the answer is no, not really, right? I know like some surface answers. I could come up with a wish list, right? But it's not enough to actually compel me to take action. It's not enough to compel me to show up differently than I have in the past. That's not a bad thing. It just means you don't really want the shit you think you want. So then go figure out what it is you do want. And for some of you, you guys have had calls with people who were like, Jess, this is my year. I got to have $1 million year. And I'm like, cool, let's do it. Why do you want $1 million? And they're like, because it sounds cool. And I'm like, uh-huh. And here's the thing. If they really just wanted it because it sounded cool, they could even do it then. But when I scratch a little deeper, it's like, oh, I want $1 million business because I need to prove to my mom that artists can be successful. I want $1 million business because I need to stick it to the man. I'm going to like down with the patriarchy. I got news. Your $1 million business is not going to take down the patriarchy. Like, go for it, but you're not doing it on your own. Okay. Like, no, when we dig a little deeper, they're like, well, actually, like, I kind of like my life and things are pretty good right now. And I'm like, so what you're telling me is you're actually good right now. And they're like, yeah, okay. But here's what's interesting about that. That's the honesty shift in another way. Acknowledging that you don't need to strive for something that you thought you really wanted is not giving up. It's recognizing like, well, if it sounds fun to go make $1 million, then I can, right? If I just want to like play and see what happens, cool, knock yourself out. I don't care. I'll help you do it. Okay. But if there's any piece of you that's like, oh, that's got to happen. Yep, need that. If you're proving something, if you're sticking it to someone, if you're whatever, then we got to dial it back and figure out why. And the more, I think, maybe the way to sum up the honesty shift the most is being honest about what it is you actually want and where it is you are. And sometimes you're already good. And that doesn't mean that you can't want more or you don't want more, but you may need to go have different experiences. Every time that I go to a different country, every time that I really mix up the routine, every time that I allow myself to have different experiences, I come back with new clarity around what it is I do want, right? I was in Iceland. You guys, I have embraced pandemic chic, okay? Like, it consists of a lot of sweatpants and I was pregnant in the middle of all of this. Like, I just fully embraced it. Okay. I go on vacation and I see a sweater that's made out of merino wool and it's knit very well and it's made very well and it looks amazing and it's the kind of thing that I'll have till I'm 80 and it's $250 and I bought it, right? There is a 0% chance that I would have bought a $250 sweater, like just scrolling the internet one night or like going shopping one night with my kid or something. That would not make it into my bag. But all of a sudden, getting into a different environment showed me, oh, you know what? Right. There are things that I value. There are things that I care about. right? And some of you need to have different experiences. You got a little bit of Groundhog's Day going on, like same shit, different day. Just over and over and over and over, right? And it's really hard to get excited about what it is you want next if you're not having different experiences to show you what is possible. I have said a lot. How are you all? I also feel like I just talked about 8 shifts at once.
I was thinking about this. It's actually
Arlene, we might have to kill your video, and then I think you can try talking.
all right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
No, still nothing.
yeah, it's okay.
Sorry, we've been testing my phone broadcast speed and it's absolutely disgraceful. No, going particularly kind of listening about your husband, and it's just it's in that which yeah, I can totally apply that to my other half. I think in that situation, it's just going back to the stuff that annoys you because it's the flip side of what you want. And I think when you're in a rut or in a situation that you know too well and you can't navigate your way out of, it's easier to look at what's annoying me about this situation. What could I fix about this situation? And then kind of use that as a springboard for, well, what do I want? And I was going through the worksheets for this week and figuring out the last one, the reverse engineering your goals. And I realized I want to change how I do not my pricing, but my scheduling.
Mhm.
And it's like, so I charge on a per character rate, which relates back to an hourly rate. I'm just going to give myself more time to do everything because that makes me happier. One of the things that
Yes.
really annoys me is that I always feel under time pressure. And I was just like, well, you're kind of doing that to yourself. You are self-employed.
Yes, yes to all. The I mean, this is some of the value of reverse engineering, right? Is you may start to notice, where does it break down for me? Where do I not know what the answers are? Where are things clunkier than I prefer? Where do I have opportunities that I haven't seen yet, right? I'm glad you did that. So where does that leave you then? Are you okay with?
I think for yes, I mean for my direct clients, they don't see the calculation to hourly.
Yeah.
Translation companies do because that's how they want to be charged. But I just say like kind of, okay, it's going to take this long. Here's the price, and then they won't see that underneath I'm pushing out the timescales, and I'm already quoting those clients a higher price. And
Yes.
so it means I won't maybe generate as much income in a week as I would if I packed everything in. But it's just like I'm never happy doing that.
Yes.
And so it's just like, would I rather earn slightly less and be happy generally and be more rested and be happier with what I deliver? And it's just like, God, yeah, I would give an order to them.
Yes. I think
so there's no big effort on my part. I just have to do it.
yeah. Okay. Some of changing things for the better or allowing yourselves to have more is, yes, first acknowledging your preferences. Okay, so like Arlene just said, like, would I rather this or that? Would I rather have a little bit less money and more time, or would I rather have a little bit more money but feel all this pressure, right? So if you guys have, this is common advice that goes to how you teach kids to make decisions, right? You don't walk up to a 2-year-old and like open the closet door and say, what do you want to wear? Right? Because like way too much, way too many options, way too much thinking, right? They don't know what season it is. And no. So with a 2-year-old, all you do is you say, do you want this outfit or this outfit? Right? And you hold up 2 options and you let them pick, right? Between those 2. And the places where you have a hard time making a decision, narrow your options, right? Again, this flies in the face of like kind of conventional mindset advice where it's like, you have limitless possibilities. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, some of you do not want limitless possibilities because it's going to be overwhelming and you will choose nothing. Okay. So like what happens if you have the option of less money, more time, more money, less time? Which one do you want, right? And it's like, pick your outfit, right? And then the next step might be like, well, but what if I could have both, right? Like as you become comfortable, as you gain discernment for yourself, as you understand what it is that's right for you, what it is you prefer, what it is you want and need, then it's easier to say, I want this and this, right? Where we run into like mindset blocks, limiting beliefs, right, is where we think it's this or this. We can have this one thing I want or this other thing that I want, or maybe this thing that I want, but only on, like days that are on a weekend and not in Mercury retrograde. I don't know, right? Like we start like piling on all kinds of rules for like when we can or can't have something. So, but if it feels like you can't have all the things, then narrow your options, right? You may have to go with like if I had to scrap this entirely versus if I did it all the way, right? Some clients are like, I want to work on getting off of social media. And I'm like, what does this working on getting off of social media thing mean? Like, just stop posting, just don't post. And they're like, but what about, and I'm like, no posting. If it does not feel good, do not post, right? Yep, stop. Yeah, that. I need a GIF of that. Like just, because that's not to say that you'll never bring back social media again. It's not to say when you only hold up 2 options that your kid is only ever going to choose between those 2 outfits. There's a whole other closet, fine, but only choose between 2 things to begin with. And then once you know, okay, yes, green is better, then you can pull out the next thing. Okay, well, now green or yellow, right? But don't try to like look at the whole smorgasbord and choose from there, right? And I say that, Arlene, because like you made a decision based on, like you said, more time, a little bit less money versus all the pressure. That's a preference type of choice. That's a good place to start, right? Measure your preferences, pay attention to what it is that would feel better. And then start bringing in different options. Oh, well, okay, now I'm working this much. I've gotten the pressure to a place where that feels manageable. Now what would feel good? Well, actually, now I'm wondering if I can have the current level of effort and work that I am okay with, but I can make what it is I used to make. Right? And you start adding back in what it is you know you do want.
So some days I feel I have to start from a place of which of these do I hate less?
Yes. And that's fine. If that's where you're starting, that's fine. Some days that's all we have clarity around is like, what would piss me off less? Fine. You can't, you guys, there's like, what would be ideal? And then there's where we actually are. And it does you no good to have shit around where it is you actually are. The honesty shift is fundamentally about having compassion on yourself and getting to a place where you're like, yes, I can accept that as a CEO, I'm definitely not as good as I am as a service provider. Fine, fantastic. Right? But then, like, practicing the compassion muscle of that doesn't mean that I suck and am doomed to failure is really important. So if where you're starting is, I know that I really hate this thing and this thing is only slightly intolerable, then we're going to go with the slightly intolerable thing and we're going to call it a win for the day. Are there
I think
particular things you're thinking of, Arlene?
it can be really normal stuff. I mean, there was I think something that I read by Brene Brown, and she was talking about trying to work with her husband and family, and that every morning they would come in and they would rate themselves out of 10. And so if like somebody had slept really badly the night before, it's just like, look, I'm a 3. I've only got 3 to give you. Like whatever number we have to make today, I can only contribute 3. And
Yeah.
that was a form of honesty. It's just like something happened this morning, or I didn't well last night, or whatever. And it's just like I only have 3 to contribute today. And just to say like, look, this is where I'm coming from today. I'm cranky.
Yes.
I'm tired. I don't feel well. I have a headache. Whatever. Like I still love you, but this is how I'm going to behave today. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Staying at this. Spoons is something my other half has recently learned about using. Yes. And I think it's hard to be honest about that sometimes. You want to be 8 to 10 every day, but it's
right. Yes. This goes back to the whole like having a growth mindset about having a growth mindset thing. Like you don't arrive somewhere. Like moving average can improve maybe, sure, like generally, but it might need to be like a really long moving average. Right? Don't look at like 1 week's moving average. Have I improved? That is not enough time. You get to have weeks, even months that are not as good as others. That's fine. Okay. How are the rest of you? Yeah, Dana said newbies to rowing always ask how long it takes to learn to row, which is not a thing. It's so technical, you never stop learning. But I mean, true for everything. This is, you guys, this is where school kind of screws us over. Because like school conditions us like, oh, you have learned enough now to go to 5th grade. Oh, you have learned enough now to get your diploma. Oh, congratulations, you are smart enough to go to this school, but not that school. Right? And it's like, this is not a thing. This is not how life actually works at all. Yes, you check this box, you win the game. Like, it just kind of goes on forever and ever. And this is why, you guys, if we're going to be playing this game forever and ever, pick a game you like. Make sure it's actually a game you want to be playing. Do not be a rower and commit yourself to learning all the technicalities of it if you would rather be a swimmer. Out of the boat, into the water, fine, do your thing, right? The what's humbling about that is that it takes some of us longer than others. My husband knew he was going to be an engineer when he was like 4. Okay. That was clear. I still don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up. I will do this as long as it serves me. And then if it ever doesn't serve me, I will happily do something different. Right. But like, not everybody figures it out right away. And so while you're in that like discernment getting phase, you kind of look like a hot mess. And I think the older you are, or the more successful you've been, or the smarter you were, or the more people like held you up on a pedestal, the more terrifying it is to let yourself really figure out, well, like, do I actually want to learn how to row, or would I be better off being a Peloton person? Right. Wait, hang on. Okay. Bobby said, oh, she said the reverse engineering thing has come up twice now this week, which is super interesting. I'm starting to look at what else I can reverse engineer in my business. Cool. If you want to say more about that, you can. We can either talk here, or if you can't talk, you can bang it out in the chat. Hi.
Hi, I'll unmute for a minute. My husband's on a meeting, so hopefully you guys don't hear the background noise. It's interesting. I had a sales coaching call yesterday with a new company I'm partnering with, and I am not my business's salesperson. I have somebody who does that because I already know it's not what I like to do. And so I don't want to be the person responsible for that. But what was interesting on the coaching call was that the guy talking was saying that he's like, you should know your customer journey from finish to start. And when I was talking back with him, I said, oh, yeah, I totally need to go through it with my team, the customer journey from start to finish. And he was like, no, from finish to start.
Finish to start. Yeah.
And I had to stop for a second. I'm like thinking to myself, why? Why from finish to start? And then it kind of hit me before he even said anything. I was like, okay, focusing on the outcome and how that looks and how that feels shows you more about how to get there and how you're going to feel along the way. And it was just like, it's not like I don't know that, but I didn't know that. It didn't hit me. And so it was really cool hearing that and then jumping on here and talking about reverse engineering. It's just kind of making me think, okay, what are the sticking points in what I'm trying to build with myself, with my team? And can I reverse engineer them so that they're not sticking points anymore?
Yes.
So leading to lots of deep thought here.
It's very validating, right? I mean, because that's literally the exercise in prep work is like, write down what button your person has to click to check out, and write down the next thing they had to do right before that, and right before that. There's a reason for that. That's cool though. This is, I think, again, a doer versus a beer thing. Because doers are like, I have a person right in front of me. I will say whatever I need to say in order to get them to know or understand or buy what it is I want, right? It is like, I will like zig and zag there to get this result, right? Whereas a beer says exactly what you described. Like, here's what we're going for. Now, how do we feel along the way? What does this person need to know in order to make a decision when they're, 4 steps back, right? It's much more about the process of getting a person to a result, in this case, buying or not, as opposed to like, how do I force and cajole you through the thing, right? Because I need the sale, right? And instead, what you're describing, thinking of it backwards is like, okay, well, what you end up with is who is the right person to even become aware of me to begin with. Right. And I think this is where a lot of beers end up not loving social media, is because the idea of like, oh, getting in front of everybody seems so appealing. But then like you realize like you need like 1% of the population, 0.001% of the population, right? And needing so few people means that getting in front of everybody is actually a massive distraction and is just a huge like sink of your time and energy.
I think what's funny about that is that you're talking about social media, and the first thing that popped into my head after you said reverse engineering, and it, you know, I heard it yesterday, was I need to reverse engineer how to get my social media going. I have people to do it, which is really cool and comforting because it's also totally not my thing. But I still have to figure out at least a framework. And because my people don't know how, I either need to find a person who does, or I need to provide that. And what I've been doing is literally beating my head against a wall of where do I start?
Yes.
And so I'm creating workflows and swim lanes and all this project management stuff. And it's like making my brain hurt. And I think that by coming at it from what's the result and what do I want to see might actually not hurt my head quite so much.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So what you were just talking about in terms of like, you have executing people who will like take what you tell them to do and go do it. You guys, this is something to be very mindful of as you look for support or as you look for answers for yourself, is like sometimes the thing to go get is a person to make a decision that you don't want to make. Right. So that's why as soon as Bobby was like, so I need to like come up with a framework, I'm like, do you? Like that may be a thing to not do yourself. Like you may be better off not like, if you need to execute yourself for a while, you may be better off doing that for yourself and having somebody be like, here's what we're going to do. Right. I was just talking to somebody who realized that she had far less resistance to posting on social media if somebody else like wrote the post for her first, and then she kind of just like went in and tweaked it a little bit, because she's like, oh, like I'm not really attached to it then. And like if it worked, well, then it worked great. And if it didn't, it doesn't feel like the post that I wrote sucked. Right. So like padded offices for everybody. So knowing whether what you're needing help with is emotional bandwidth or execution is huge, because that is like, are we reverse engineering this or are we like moving forward on getting this done? Right. And a lot of you, if you're having a hard time getting started, it's because you need somebody to come in and make a decision. You don't need help like getting shit done because you haven't decided yet what's going to get done. Right. So you may need, the actual help may need to be somebody to tell you like, here's how we're going to reverse engineer this. Oh, or do it yourself, fine, but then know that that's what you're doing. That's really cool, Bobby.
I think the craziest part about thinking about all of this is that it's literally what I do for clients.
Mhm.
I'm the person who's like coming up with a strategy for how to move forward and all of these things, yet I'm also the sticking point in that in my own company. So
Yes.
it's coming to the, I guess, the understanding and the realization that it doesn't need to be me. And then getting to the point where I don't want it to be me. Because sometimes I
Yes.
do want it to be me. And so sometimes I have to let go and say, it really shouldn't be.
Yes. Um, yeah, I mean, and Susan's right, you know, that you can accept help like your clients accept help. Um, also, like, there's something to be said, like what you may have been doing is figuring out what is it that we want, right? It's hard to have somebody help you make a decision if if you don't have some kind of clarity, right? Like I can't help my husband make the decision right now. Do I keep my job? Do I go get another job? He has no clarity right now. I'm like, sometimes he's like, what? I'm like, you are walking the typical burnout path right now. I see it coming, right? And he's like, well, why don't you help me? And I'm like, because you haven't hit rock bottom yet. You're not there. You're not ready to be helped. Right. And so if you're not, yes, also not my job. Uh, but like, if you're not in a position yet to have somebody, like Arlene said, hold up 2 outfits for you, right? Then you're in the I'm trying shit phase to see what's right for us. And that part is just uncomfortable. It is. So you're either going to use your time or your money to figure out who it is you could bring in to help you make those decisions. Right. So you're either going to use your own time, like trying things out, trying to make a framework, experimenting, whatever, or you're going to like throw some money behind somebody so that you're not putting your time and energy into it, but then just know that you may be 6 months into it and be like, shit, this isn't quite right. And then that's okay, because that's what the experiment was. The experiment was, is this the right thing for us? Not, did it work? I cannot say that enough, you guys. The experiment is not, did it work? It's like, is this the thing I want to do? Is this right for me? Did I like this? That's the experiment. We're not experimenting for did it work? Yeah, Dana said, like being inspired by fashion trends to do your own thing, not following the trend like a robot. Sure. How are you? Hi, Bobby.
One thing I realized when I was doing the worksheet again last night, I didn't get as far as the reverse engineering one, but like it was like thinking back of like when I started my business and why I started it and all the things and sort of what I was expecting out of it. It was interesting. Like I thought about what my life would be like if that had all sort of magically happened, like the way it was, you know, supposed to, like you follow the plans and you did the things right. And I was like, would that have been sustainable right now with the way I'm feeling and my health and all the things? And I'm like, probably not. I probably wouldn't have been enjoying it very much. Like, you know, there's still some parts of that I still would like to happen because I mean, there's reasons behind some of the things, but it's just like, yeah, that probably actually wouldn't have worked out super well in the end anyway. So, you know, the ping pong machine or the pinball machine of going back and forth and all the things probably has been a lot more helpful in teaching me what is sustainable and what I do want out of it, you know, plus the things that I still would like to happen eventually. But it's,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. This is why that was like one of actually, I wrote my whole post that I wrote in the group last night. And then I went back and I added that last bullet of like letting go of dreams or like things that goals that you had for yourself that are no longer a good fit, right? And sometimes that doesn't feel good. Like we realize like, oh, okay, the ship has sailed and that opportunity has passed. Okay, that may not feel great. But then other times it's like realizing that where life took you no longer necessitates what it is you thought you wanted at that point, right? Or that you wanted those things for like reasons that don't even matter anymore. Or like Dana said, that like that wouldn't even be feasible or desirable right now. You guys, there are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. There's no mistakes. That needs to be a mug. I need to get a mug. There are no mistakes.
I'm just noticing how little this triggers me compared to the first time I started working with you, and how this was very triggering. And so I think it's really interesting. It's just like watching, it's like, well, this is fascinating. And I'm sure there are other deeper things that probably do trigger me about that I'm still holding on to. But yeah, I'm just, it's not that I don't care. It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating.
I think I saw your comment last night before you like edited it and added the shrugging emoji, right? Like that, right? Like that is like yet another phase of growth, right? To recognize that you don't need to like control things or white knuckle things. What comes after that is like starting to consciously pick what you want, right? Sometimes people have been in shoulder shrugging mode for a while, and then they start to get like this niggle of like, they're the people who call me and they're like this, Jess, everything's good. I'm happy. Like I like my life. It's fine. But I think there's a lot more I could have. I think there's a lot more I could do. And it's not coming from a place of like discontentment, right? It's just like, ooh, there's untapped potential, right? And that's kind of then like the next phase. But it's very different to come at your growth from a place of like, this sounds juicy and fun. Like I was talking about $1 million business owners. If you were just like, it would be fun to do this, I want to give it a try and see what happens. Cool, let's do it, right? And that's when you're like past the point of needing to prove something. Hang on, let's see, I want to make sure I don't miss stuff.
Yeah.
Arlene
And
said, what?
I have a client who, similar to your husband, doesn't know what she wants, and it's having to do with relationships, not work. But it's really fascinating just to, it's like, and you can just sit in the not knowing, and that's really hard for her to do because she's a very strong, active mind. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of interesting just now to do that. And I'm kind of just following what feels fun. So if it feels fun to nap, I will nap. If it feels fun to write a book, I've taken action on that and it feels very flowy. So yeah, it's interesting place to be. It's hard to describe to people who aren't there. So I don't know how to say it.
This is the importance of meeting people where they are. This is why we talk so much about being careful about even the advice that you get in here, right? Because you guys, I don't like, I know many of you very well at this point, or like we've talked a lot, or like I know a amount of your shit, but like only you can feel for yourself what is actually true. And so if it doesn't actually feel, I said this to my husband this weekend, like if you don't stand up different than you sat down, it didn't work. Meaning like if you chant some affirmations to yourself and you don't feel different afterwards, then don't try that shit again. Change it up, right? If you tap, if you meditate, if you journal, if you talk to a person, if you come to these calls, I don't care what it is, right? Pay attention to how you feel in response to the thing. Like what, and that is the only way that you start to flex this discernment muscle. Because at the end of the day, like as well-intentioned as I am or anybody else may be, and like, let's not even talk about the people who do just straight up want to sell you their snake oil blueprint. But like, as well-intentioned as anybody may be, you're the only one who's going to be able to answer any of these questions for yourself based on where it is you find yourself, which is why the honesty shift is so important.
This situation, I haven't actually been through the entire module, but this conversation reminds me that when I was younger, I was part of a social group, and it was really exciting to be part of that group. But there was something about it for me that just felt off and limiting in some capacity. And there were some really strong and dynamic personalities in this group. And I felt like they were constantly overshadowing things I knew I needed for myself. And it just strikes me that like deep inside, you really know what you need. To make a long story short, I orchestrated an exit from that group that was a little less than volatile. And at the time I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. That didn't feel quite right. But having done it, and then now years later, kind of rebuilding where I am and what I do and how I view myself, I realized that I orchestrated that exit on purpose. And it was one of those things like you don't always know exactly why you're doing it. And could I have done it better? Probably. But it was like, it was almost like the feeling that I was drowning and I knew I had to get to the surface and I was gonna, get there no matter how I could. And just really like that saving the piece of me that I knew I was losing if I had stayed in.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
yeah, yes, it does. It's a really good example of you guys, like sometimes you're going to hold an identity really close that is going to keep you in situations that you know aren't right.
mhm.
And it's like, it's going to look like the smart thing to do is this, the right thing to do is this. Well, but I know that I want XYZ thing, and that's the fastest way to get there. Right. And the more willing you are to do things that look and sound like not quite there, the less you need a justification for your decisions, the more it is you know yourself.
Mhm.
Right? So when you don't need to explain something either to yourself or someone else, and you can just say like, this is the next right thing, this is the thing to do, this is the thing I'm not putting up with anymore, it's a good indicator, right, of how well, not only how well you know yourself, but how well you're letting yourself take action on what it is you know. And those, it's cool that you have that experience, because we all kind of have those experiences where we can look back and be like, oh, that's
Mhm.
could have gone sideways, but I knew it wouldn't, and it didn't. Right. Diane, did you have more? Because what you just brought up kind of relates to what Diane or what Arlene said in the chat,
Um,
because she was talking about sunk
oh,
cost.
I didn't read. Um, you, you know, it's funny because now, of course, it's years later and I can look back and I think about the strides I made since that exit. And I don't know if Arlene's friend felt this way as well, but I know that there was just something in there that had to get out, um, and that I'm so much more at home and at peace with my circumstances and where I am and my growth since exiting that group.
Yes.
But there were costs. There were costs associated with it, but I'm good with them. Like it, I think, you know, you get to that place where, like you said, you don't have to explain, or you know that that what you did was for your good, for your, you know, it may not have pleased everybody, but it was for your good.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. That's true with your customers. You're
Mhm.
gonna axe a product or service line. You're gonna decide you don't do XYZ thing anymore. You're gonna raise your rates. You're gonna whatever, right? The less you feel the need to justify that decision, the more you know you're ready to act on it, right? And that doesn't always mean that you can wait until you have no yeah buts or justifications, right? But it's a good indicator of like, am I ready to do this thing? Um, Arlene brought up this example. She said, I have a friend who really thought he wanted to be a priest. He was ex-military and he studied for 6 months, and the inactivity frustrated the living daylights out of him. Except when he got to dig a well. It's funny. And it took him a while to appreciate that it wasn't a waste of 6 months of his life. He had answered one of his big life questions. So Arlene's question is then like, how do we release sunk costs? You guys, there's only sunk costs if we think there's a place to get, right? Like if your friend views choosing a career path as like a thing to be done, like the more you view life like a series of check boxes, like, okay, did that, did that, did that, the more you're going to care about sunk costs, because there are like, we have boxes to check, there are things to do, we have things to cross off this list, right? But like, that's not life. You're living it every day. And so if you have the opportunity to understand how it is you want to live life, then everything improves from there on out, right? So, okay, practically speaking, how do we release sunk costs? Sunk costs come from the idea of a limited amount of time, right? When we have time scarcity, because we should have done something else, right? Oh, we could have been using those 6 months instead for XYZ thing. Okay, well, we could have blankety blank. You guys, I thought that when I first started my business, I thought that within, 3 years or something, I'd be able to retire my husband, right? Like, and so, but does that mean that all the missteps that I made early on were actually a mistake? Well, no, because they got me to where I am now. We hear the expression, what got you here won't get you there, a lot, right? So people often mean that forward thinking, right? That like, oh, you're going to have to change how you think if you want to get past where it is you are right now. That's true, but that also works retroactively, you guys. because there's no way you would have gotten to where you are now if you wouldn't have had experiences that made you change your thinking. And for better or worse, a lot of those are mistakes. And we only like improve our thinking or change how we're coming at things in order to be ready for the next level by making these mistakes, right? I said this recently that like every zero that you add on to income is like a huge level of thinking that needs to change. Well, but the difference between $10 and $100, or even $10 and $1,000, is not that much. And yet there are huge shifts in thinking that have to happen at each of those, right? And so, but it's the same with life, like understanding who you are and how you like to show up and what's right for you. This is what's hilarious about like when you take an entrepreneur who's been an entrepreneur for however long, right? They've had some level of success. And then they say, okay, I'm going to start this weekend. I'm going to start from scratch. It's not going to have my picture on anything. My name is not associated with this. I'm going to show you guys how I would do this from scratch. And I'm like, do you have it? Like, you're taking you with you to that new business. You can't not take you with. And so it doesn't matter. You're not actually starting from scratch because you know how it is you like to work. You know, do I need a cup of coffee or a cup of tea next to me? You know, do I need to go for a run first or do I need to save that for afterwards? You know all these things about yourself that somebody who's just starting out does not know. So horseshit, you're not doing the whole thing of starting over. No, you are not. Right. But when the only way we realize that sunk costs aren't sunk costs is if we get the nugget out of it. Like, what is it that we learned? What is it that I got? What result did I get? This is why I tell you guys that the result you're going for is not, did it work? In your friend's case, it wasn't, the result wasn't like, did I become a priest? Right? The result was, is this what I want? Do I know myself? How do I like to show up? That's what you're going for. Always. It is the process.
It's one of these things that you're expected to just know that, like genetically, you're supposed to know what you want, know
Okay, wait,
how
Arlene.
you should be doing. Oop, am I muted?
No, you weren't muted, but the beginning was kind of crackly. So try again.
Sorry. I think it's like kind of if you, I mean, it makes sense to us because we've been through prep work and everything, but it's just if you say to somebody, you have to figure you out, it sounds ridiculous. It's just like, how can I not know what I like? How can I not know how it's best for me to work? Shouldn't that be like knowing if a room is too hot or too cold? And I think it's real, but I think as well, people don't see that. And so they see the sunk cost instead of like it being some kind of life R&D cost. Like you have to
Yes.
quote spend that R&D cost, be it time or effort or money or what it is, to figure out your approach and whether stuff is going to work. But people never see that. Like I
Yes.
have an accounting category, which is purchase of test material. And I worked with that with my accountant. She's like, well, what are you selling it? And I was like, no, this is for me to burn through while I figure out what I'm going to do with it. And she's like, okay,
Yes.
I'll make up a category.
Nice. But yes, right? Every company that does well, you hear about them doing this, right? Where they tell their employees like 20% of your time needs to be like pissed away on experiments, right?
Mhm.
Or like you said, an R&D department or whatever, doesn't really matter. But that is figuring out what's right. Okay. How are you all? Diane, were you good? I know we kind of like segued. Not so gracefully.
Nope, all good.
Alrighty. Jill, are you good?
I'm fine. I was laughing at the conversation about FOMO in the comments.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, because Dana made a comment about like knowing how she used to have FOMO about wanting to join like really high-end, big, expensive masterminds. And now she said, I've spent enough money on those types of programs to know they're not for me. And that I wouldn't, but like I wouldn't have learned that any other way. Yes.
Yeah, and now sometimes like those emails, they're legitimately a source of hilarity to me. Like I will like open up an email and see the price, and I literally just sit at my computer and I cry and I laugh for about 5 minutes. And I'm just like, you have to be kidding me. You want me to pay what for what? And I just, it's great, but it's a nice shift from like, oh my God, like this might be the thing. You know, there's still that
Yes.
to a tiny extent for certain little tiny things, but not those. Yeah, it's fun to be able to switch so extremely.
Yes. Yes. This is a little bit to how you start to like people can't screw with you, you guys. Like if you don't need to justify yourself, if you don't need to explain yourself, if you don't end up with FOMO, like you kind of can't be screwed with. Your dad can say whatever he's going to say at Thanksgiving. You can get whatever email you're going to get. You can make whatever decision you're going to make, and people can respond however they want to. And it doesn't matter because you feel no need to explain it, right? Because you're secure. Why don't we need to explain something? Because it's knowledge, right? So I think that's actually a really important. Okay, this is important. We don't need to explain things that we know. I would not need to explain 2 + 2 is 4 to anyone here because we know, right? But how do we know? We know because we have lived experience that tells us that. So you don't need to explain things to people, your decisions. You don't need to explain how you're running your business. You don't need to explain or justify really anything. Why you're not buying a course, why you are buying a course, why you are on social media, why you aren't, why you're vegan, why you're stuffing your face with turkey. Like it doesn't matter, right? Like you don't need to justify anything that you know, right? And the knowledge comes from lived experience. The clunky part of that is you got to go get lived experience, right? And I think that is part of the whole purpose of prep work is like, go take enough action to get lived experience so that you know you. So that you don't need to explain or justify, and so that you can just like freely make decisions for yourself, right? Okay. Anyone else? Questions, comments, cares, concerns? Alan's dog face is just killing me. Like the whole time, just seeing a dog staring at me is pretty hilarious. So, all
I
right.
think it also works. I think I said to you in a different conversation that I was thinking of whether something I wanted to say, was it reasonable, was it plausible, etc. And I think that was a signal to me that I didn't believe what I was trying to say.
Yes.
I think you can also apply it in that direction.
Yes, for sure. right? A place where you're having a hard time is probably a place where you need to go get more certainty for yourself. Knowledge is certainty, right? So if we go back to seeking shift, if you're lacking knowledge, you're lacking some kind of certainty for yourself about like what is true. Go get it. Okay. Practical questions can go into the group. If you are stuck, noticing something, it should go in the group. Okay. We can point you in a direction then. If you are in the US, enjoy your Thanksgiving, if you so choose. Please know yourself before purchasing Black Friday things, if you were so inclined. I feel like I should make an SOS post in prep work, like a come here before you FOMO purchase. We will talk you off the ledge and point you to a shift instead. All right. See you guys next week. Let me know how you're doing. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.